everyone back to our new videocast series, Beyond the High T Headlines, where we go beyond the press releases and explain exactly what's really happening in the world of IT and data. More specifically, what it means for your business. We expect to publish these bi-weekly, and we'll continue to push the narrative beyond the headlines with different guests and provocative points of view. I'm Sean Rosemarin, and I'm your host. And with that, today's topic, we got something real special. AI is now in its third year post the launch of ChatGPT. I'll call that the shot heard around the world. And ultimately, boardrooms are clamoring to show they're taking this seriously. POCs are rampant. But where's the real value? In today's episode, we're really going to break it down. And to help us do that, I couldn't be happier. And to bring in a guest from a different show, our own Rob Ludeman from the Pure Report. Rob, welcome to the show.
Sean, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm not used to being on this side of the microphone, as you know, but yes, the Pure Report collaborating with you. It is great to have this chat. I'm really excited to dive in. AI is such an interesting topic, as everybody knows, but I've also been one that's been a little bit more on the skeptical side and still waiting to see the value in certain areas. So I'm looking forward to digging into that with you today.
Well, we love skeptics. Let's start with the coldest of cold opens. MIT published a study just a couple of weeks ago talking about 95% of GenAI pilots were not paying off. The return wasn't there. The TCO wasn't there. The fact is, I want to be really clear. Is this a surprise? 95% of GenAI pilots aren't paying off. I guess
I'm not that surprised. It's early innings, right, Sean? I mean, I'm a little gray hair on my head, but I go back to when the internet was blowing up in the late 90s and there were just business models. Everybody was pushing everything into .com, and the .com boom came about largely because really we hadn't figured out how and where the value was for this. And so I kind of see some parallels in this where we're in this evolutionary versus revolutionary kind of phase. There's some revolutionary things that are happening, that are going to happen, but there's a lot of evolutionary learning that is going on, and there's a lot of small wins. So I'm not surprised to see this. What about you?
Well, look, I'm with you 100%. I expect 95% of them to fail. I mean, if I remember back even to any new innovative technology or any new innovative era, you're going to make lots of bets. And by the way, it's not about the majority of those bets paying off. It's about the 5% of the bets that do pay off, delivering a return to actually pay for more than what's out there. And, there are a couple things that really come right off the page when you look at this study that I think are more interesting than the 95%. Because frankly, like you, I expected that. It's early.
Yeah.
But what's happened here is MIT brought some really interesting stats today. First of all, they talked about the fact that to date, enterprises have invested between $30 and $40 billion. $30 and $40 billion. This is not hyperscalers. This is not neoclouds. This is overall enterprise spend is around $30 to $40 billion in GenAI. And about roughly 5% of that, right? So let's just say somewhere between, let's just round it to $1 billion. Is actually delivering measurable profit. And what they really talked to was there's actually a lot of really nice stars of brilliance in enhancing individual productivity. And, that's not a huge surprise. If we think about how we're using AI tools today, and we'll get into this in a little bit more detail, that really what it is. It's human plus machine. It's actually making humans more productive is where we're seeing the benefit, not all this hoopla about AI replacing humans. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I guess, the real key is going to be how to unlock that at an organizational level, right? How to expand that further, because I do see it. I see it here in our own marketing team where people are dabbling and using AI tools, and it largely is something around individual productivity. But I think once the knowledge starts getting shared and once organizations start focusing more on that collective improvement is where you may start to see some of those revolutionary breakthroughs come through.
Yeah, look, we're all learning how to use this new tool. And if I was to think back at the advent of the PC revolution, right? It was all about productivity. It was about getting people off of paper onto computers, I'm sure there were some people that said computers would replace humans, but ultimately it was humans using computers replaced humans that were not using computers. And what I find most interesting here is, what was also relevant in the study was they said AI integration fails to contribute to profits due to brittle workflows, lack of contextual learning, and misalignment with day-to-day operations. Like, of course, you can't just take technology and just drop it into an organization. The organization, the people and process have to transform at the same speed as the technology solutions. So while I credit MIT for, helping us understand where we were, I'm kind of in your camp, Rob. Like, this is kind of what we expected.
Don't you think there's also some of that wasted spend where there was a tendency for companies just to throw AI into everything? I think I was in a Best Buy getting a new TV recently, and you're walking by the washing machine aisle and you're walking by the refrigerator aisle, and they're shoving AI into that. Like, I don't need AI in a washing machine. It really has a core function, and maybe more buttons and more options is great, but I don't see how AI is going to add value there. And so companies are spending money potentially in areas hoping to get an impact, or maybe just to ride the hype and ride the wave. And really, it's probably wasted because of that, because I just think there are areas where it doesn't apply. You don't need to add AI into everything. And so I think the message is for organizations, focus on where it can make the biggest impact for a broader set of people in a group.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of the AI washing, right? It reminds me of when we were kids with the cereal boxes, right? Now with AI inside.
Yep. Now with AI.
I think my washing machine is perfectly fine without AI. I think, running a typical wash cycle does not need an engine inside to tell me whether or not the clothes are actually clean. I'm very comfortable with that. I don't think my toaster needs AI. So I'm with you. The good news is that on the back of that study, there was actually another study recently that came out from Gartner in their hype cycle. And I do watch Gartner's hype cycle because it's kind of a bit of a good barometer as to where things are at. And, the claim in this hype cycle was Gartner basically put AI agents, so call them chatbots, and AI engineering or coding at the peak buzz. And they also touched on a really big piece of this, which is AI-ready data. And I want to dive into that because, it's kind of interesting when you think about the fact that we're building and training these systems on data, but we're not spending a whole lot of time talking about what's the readiness of that data. So I don't know, your thoughts. I mean, you read a lot, you look a lot at what's out there. Do you think anybody's data today is really in that state where they're ready to go and train AI and build a replacement to some of the humans with expertise and skills in the organization?
I think there's still limitations, and I think we covered this on a past Peer Report podcast as well in pretty good detail, right? Is that the way that we've been capturing data and the way we've been collecting data over time has either been done in silos or has been where there hasn't been the intention to have it clean and AI ready. And I think your big point was that all data really up until somewhat lately has been human captured data, right? This is information that we're pulling as humans. And again, I love doing historical parallels. I can go back to ETL relative to data warehousing, and things that held back ETL and proper data warehousing were the degree to which the data was clean and prepared to run big, long queries on that data. And that was what held you back, as well as data being in silos. So I think, again, the message is everyone needs to take a step back, ensure that there's the right level of data quality, that it's validated, that you understand where the data sources are, that there's tagging involved, right? There just needs to be more attention. And then I think we're able to start getting to where these data pipelines can be more streamlined.
Well, it's funny to hear you say that, right? Because if you think just think of basic academics, doing your master's, doing your PhD, writing your thesis, you were always pointed to the library. And in the library, there were academic journals. And the academic journals had been actually qualified by the librarian and the research institution to say, these are valid research materials. We actually have a very good process for doing this. But yet, when it came to AI, it was like, we don't need to validate any of these sources. We'll just take all the data we have. The machine will figure it out. But you see, the problem is, as humans, and I remember my history teacher telling me way back, this is probably grade 7 or grade 8, that history is not what happened. History is what one person or a group of people recorded around what happened. And when we think of what we are now doing in systems like CRM and systems like EMR, in systems like even, systems within the government of what happened on a given day, it's not actually a reflection of what really happened. It's a reflection of what was recorded by that human at that time about what happened. And taking that type of information, human generated, human curated, human recorded, and then asking machines to go learn and train off of it. I don't know, Rob, it begs the question, do we really have to start to rethink about the way we're collecting this data and the way that we're cataloging it and curating it in order to move it to a training cycle?
Yeah, I think some attention is needed around that, particularly maybe in the areas of monitoring or governance. I think everybody just really went off and just started saying, okay, we've got all this data. Let's just go throw it into models and see what comes out and what happens. And guess what turns out? Not every response is what we want or what we expected, or you get hallucinations. So I think there is a new approach required. I kind of, when I was thinking about talking to you about this, it was sort of like we're in a place. Take the analogy of running a marathon. You wouldn't, if you wanted to run a marathon, you wouldn't just go out and do it next week, right? You would take months. I mean, I did it one time, and one time was enough to know I never wanted to do it again. But I spent the 3 to 4 months doing the training and followed a program and developed all the cycles and did extra workout. And so I'm using this hopefully interesting analogy to say the dealing with data and this human created data, I think we need to slow down and take a more deliberate approach as if you were training for a marathon, and to prepare that to take that same approach with data and prepare and go back.
Well, I'm with you. I mean, you look at some of what's going on today, you look at, people saying, hey, Reddit's a great place for us to train off of, Quora's a great place for us to train off of. And you sit back and say, but hold on a second, what's the validity of those opinions? It's always great to have a great spectrum of opinion. But there was a reason why when we were doing academic research, we looked to academic journals that had been peer reviewed by people who were credible in that field to be able to present that research. And we still do today, but we seem to have forgotten that. And now we're pointing it to, a list of files and papers that people built. And we're saying, tell me what actually happened. So I definitely think there's a lot to be done there. And I like that Gartner really kind of picked that up and said AI ready data is kind of a key enabler of this. But what I also like, Rob, that they pinpointed out was when you looked at kind of where these different solutions lied, artificial general intelligence, Gartner's got it sitting at more than 10 years out. And if you think of what is the real definition of AGI, in terms of, a system that self-learns, that self-teaches, that self-evolves, and that interacts with humans, in many cases without humans really knowing that that's a machine. I like the realism of us actually being 10 years out from that versus what you might read online.
Marathon versus a sprint.
Well, and we're going to get there by first and foremost, humans getting comfortable having this co-pilot, having this human plus machine concept. Just like, people were very skeptical of computers at first. I joke that I'm sure people were very skeptical of calculators when they first came out. And it took us a while to get comfortable that if we put a really big number multiplied by a really big number, that whatever the answer was on the calculator, we could actually rely on. Same thing with spreadsheets. I'm sure when spreadsheets first came out, people were like, oh, we should go check. We should go do the ledger by manual. We should make sure everything works out the way it's supposed to. Artificial general intelligence, I think, is aspirational. And I think in 10 years, we'll know what it means. And we'll know what it's really going to do for us. But for now, there's easier fish to fry. And I want to kind of pivot our call to there. So if we dive in, where's the real meat here? So the first one that's obvious that I want to get your feel on is agent assist chat. And notice I didn't call it chatbots. I know the industry loves to say, hey, we could replace all these call center employees with these chatbots and people just go on an interface. I would actually tell you that the study and the research says otherwise. So the reality is, in a Fortune 500 call center, we're looking at a 14% productivity lift, and the biggest lift coming to novices. Now, that's not chatbots replacing novice call center employees. That's chatbots essentially augmenting customer service reps. And the reality is, you can imagine having a customer service rep who has the context and the ability to communicate to a human using a chatbot to actually get access to information and get access to those answers is actually the best of both worlds. Because not only does it get them faster access to information, it increases their productivity, it increases their ramp, it makes the time to resolve significantly faster. And ultimately, people ask to speak to the manager less often because they get the answers they need the first time. So if you think about this, I wanted to look for a big case to kind of bring to you for discussion. And Bank of America has a chatbot called Erica. And Erica's had over 3 billion lifetime interactions, roughly 58 million interactions per month. The reality is it's being used as much by external customers as it is by internal employees to help and augment their own business. So I don't know, from your point of view, does this sort of chatbot appeal more as a just give me the chatbot, avoid the human, or do you see it more as human plus machine and that's how this thing kind of takes flight?
What occurred to me was a couple of things. I mean, you just finished using that analogy of fear of calculators, and what I would take it back to when you talk about the agents learning from engaging as well with the chatbots, they're almost like using AI as a calculator, right? So it's complementary to what they are doing. And I'm not surprised by some of the productivity gains that are there. I think in general, when people go and engage with a support type of function and they get a chatbot, I think they'll generally try it. I'm personally of that mode, but there's also instances, and this just happened to me last weekend, Sean, where there's a capability that I'm pretty sure the chatbot's not going to be able to handle, and I'm not going to even try it, right? So I had a flight issue on one of the major carriers last weekend, sort of accidentally changed my flight to a time that I didn't want, and I called up and it offered, do you want to get on text? Do you want to get on text and deal with chatbot with us? I went, I don't think so. I I just changed this flight and I'm really pretty sure that it's not going to be able to handle that for me.
That's when you start feverishly typing agent.
Yeah. I was hitting 0 and saying agent. And finally, once I went through all the prompts, there's other times when I engage when it makes a lot of sense. But what's really interesting as you're reading through the stats there and even talking about Erica is that it's not just employees that are using it. You're seeing customers use that at scale, but also that employees are finding ways to learn. I think the novices and those lower scale agents that you talked about, when they're working side by side, it's complementary. They're learning from the engagements and they're becoming more proficient as humans because of this human plus AI interaction.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, I'm super inspired by this. And what we're seeing is actually measures start to come to place that say this is working. And in terms of maturity, I would put this long in the cycle, but the average handling time. So instead of opening manuals and doing Google searches or doing enterprise searches for content, the bot is actually steering the employee to the answer faster. So that's bringing the average handling time down. They're actually getting first contact resolution. So it doesn't have to be, I got to transfer you to a different person who has that expertise, because essentially your knowledge engine is now within that bot. Your customer sets up, because all I honestly care about as a customer is that you solve my issue. And the average resolution time is down, which means I can service more calls, my wait times go down, and once again, my customer sat goes up. So, and the key thing is the bot gets smarter as you ask it more questions, because ultimately it's learning. And now if the chatbot can actually take, because you always hear, this call is recorded for quality purposes. If the bot is actually listening to that conversation and interpreting whether or not that solved the issue and whether or not that's the right resolution, it can now self-correct. It can know that that's the right answer for the next time. So this is one area that I really think is a perfect human plus machine use case. And you start to think about, it kind of evolves on what we're doing with Slack. It evolves on what we've done with wikis. It evolves on what we've done with enterprise search, and actually gets the answer. But let's shift gears. The other area that we're seeing a lot of discussion, and we just saw some news in the last week of a few management consulting firms reducing the number of employees in their establishments because they're going to be doing a lot more research and synthesis using AI. And so, you start to think about legal ops. So you start to think about a lot of the articling, going into these big, massive bookcases and looking for jurisprudence and cases from the past. You start to think about healthcare and a lot of the research and studies that are done there that have to do with looking in periodicals and bringing key, data points to the surface. Companies like Mayo Clinic, companies like Epic, really bringing up this concept of how does human plus machine, how do we actually use machines to help us find the data? But the key piece here, Rob, is that then humans can interpret. So I'm using AI to help me find what I need, and then I'm using my human brain to decide, is it what I need? Is it contextually the right thing? And what does it actually mean to my business? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think like any technological revolution, there's going to be some impact to certain roles, right, that are there. And so human plus machine, we've heard people talk about threats, but it's happened with others, right? It's happened with the advent of electricity or moving to, cars from horse-driven buggies. And so I think what you will get now is a shift in roles. You'll get more of those people that are interpreting the data. I think we hit this, 5 or 6 years ago with the advent of more AI features going into databases, for example, right? And so we looked at, well, what does a database administrator do all day now if you have AI functions that are handling things? Oh, I don't know. Why don't they go look at what the data actually is required for and do some strategic analysis of that rather than going and writing more lines of SQL code or dealing with indexes? So it's just that shift to moving from the mundane to the value add. And I think people panic at first that there's going to be some type of impact and, jobs are going to go away. And actually it's like, no, whether you're a consultant or whether you're a physician assistant, whatever that field is where maybe you were the doer before, now you're going to be the interpreter. You're going to be the understander, you're going to be the explainer.
Well, and isn't that what humans are best at? Right? I mean, ultimately, we need context to situations, using our limbic system to reason through and think about what stuff means. So I think there's a huge play here. I mean, if you think about this as doc ops, right, to just kind of coin a new term, how do I ingest a huge amount of content? How do I chunk it? How do I retrieve it? How do I summarize it? And how do I give links so that the person who receives it can say, hey, I'd like to read about that a little further. Something seems off. That's essentially what, in many cases, research assistants were doing. But to your point on the DBA thing, like, yeah, that job may go away, but there's more exciting jobs on the other end of that. Yeah. And what's most important is, regardless of how much you summarize, you've got human triage. So where there's high risk content or something seems off or something doesn't really equate, you've got a human with the skills and experience to actually look at what the research is and say, you've triggered a thought. I know how to connect the dots here. I know how to communicate this particular point to a person. But what I love most about it is, done properly, all of the kind of manual and tedious, footnoting and referencing and hyperlinking, you've got a system and a computer that's going to do that for you, so that ultimately you're not spending 4 months trying to clean up all of your footnotes and endnotes at the end of your paper. I want to talk about the last.
I think we also, Sean, real quick, I think we have a great opportunity as well to go pitch Doc Ops as the title of a new network television that combines doctors with AI to enhance patient care. Doesn't that sound like a cool television program?
Doc Ops. Yeah, we should go patent it. Let me.
You said Doc Ops.
Yeah, well,
we should. Yeah, let's take Doc Ops. All right, sorry. Jump back into your third one here.
I was thinking of Dr. Octavius from Spider-Man, but I'm glad you took us more down a technology.
I went there as well.
Given our audience. I will look into the availability of the Doc Ops trademark. Okay, last but not least is coding. We couldn't have a discussion around the real use cases of AI without talking about coding. And, I call the coding use case the ultimate autocomplete. Now, Now, this stuff's pretty cool. I mean, I can go into ChatGPT or Anthropic or Gemini today, and I can say, write me a computer application that does the following. And, you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, GitHub Copilot, it's one of the most popular systems or platforms here, just crossed 20 million all-time users, right? It's being used by 90% of the Fortune 100 is actually building code inside GitHub Copilot. And developers are saying that they can finish tasks about 56% faster. And the reality is, where this is really putting pressure is on entry-level work. So the folks who would have built the first iteration of code, very simple code, but it's putting more pressure on senior folks to integrate code. So I don't know. I mean, do you think this coding thing has legs? It seems to be catching on real fast. Any thoughts about some of the risks here?
I mean, kind of look at it as, again, going back to that, removing some of the mundane, right? I look at this as some of that baseline coding. Yes, impact to entry-level types of jobs, but it's really taking some of the roles and taking what is equated maybe to being a mechanic, a coding mechanic, and kind of wrenching the code to turning roles into more code architects, right? This is a mechanic more shift to an architect type of function that is a little bit more strategic. I don't know. Honestly, on a personal level, when I see these things about how this is speeding up coding, I actually thought that was pretty exciting because I know that's a lot of grunt work. I know it's a lot of mundane things. And even, we look at the types of things here that we solved for at Pure Storage with, mundane aspects of managing storage. There was definitely a parallel there to taking a lot of the mechanics and moving it to more of an architecture or a strategist. So this is one where, and look, the world of coding is always kind of changing. So, I think we had the notion a little while back of waterfall where you cascaded new features in, and then we kind of moved to agile and CI/CD. And now we're on the precipice of probably something even new that's being accelerated by what a lot of these AI capabilities can do.
Yeah, I think you're bang on. I mean, if you think of the original computer languages, assembler, machine code, you were actually talking about what bit was going to move from what register to the other register. You were actually telling the hardware exactly what to do. Mm-hmm. And if I fast forward to object-oriented programming, and I fast forward to platform as a service, a lot of what the public cloud brought to bear, and you talk about low code that came out a few years ago before AI was a thing, this is a natural evolution. This actually gets the consumerization of the creation of new applications into the hands of more people, which inspires more innovation, which gets more ideas out there, which actually presents a bigger sandbox for us to all play in. Yes, does the code have to be checked? Of course. Does it have to be secured? Of course. Does it have to go through stride reviews? Of course. Does it have to go through standards? Yes. But I love what you said. It's about getting people out of the grunt work side of programming and instead focused on how am I going to integrate these complex pieces into one experience for my end user rather than sitting and trying to figure out, what's the exact command line for me to go pull this particular feature or function into an application. So look, we talked about chatbots or, human plus machine augmented chatbots. We talked about research and, the curation of documents. We talked about coding and the acceleration of coding and bringing development to market. I mean, it's so easy to cast aspersions and say, AI is not where we think it is, but is that not enough? Is that not enough for us to get started on and actually start to bring this into, the mainstream of what we do?
Yeah, I think we talked about some interesting things that organizations should be considering and starting. I mean, partly taking a step back and looking at the cleanliness of data would be one of those. Also, and we didn't hit on it as much, but I think looking at ways to measure, right? What are the metrics that show progress around this? I think also we probably need to stop being so afraid about the impact to humans, right? I think what we talked about and these use cases and stories that you brought out are really about, and I'm going to go back to the calculator analogy because that was one that came up in one of our marketing all hands recently is that we were freaked out when calculators there. What do you mean you're using a calculator? You're not actually going to do pen to paper and carry the one and, bring it down doing division. Okay, the calculator just helped us. It just sped things up. And even got so good that when we moved to graphing calculators and the ability to do exponential things and sine waves and whatever, like, that's all goodness, right? And ultimately, we still learned how to do the basic things. I don't think people are going to stop learning how to code because a high percentage of coding could now be automated via AI. There's still a level of complexity that's going to be in there. But I think we can maybe stop being so afraid and look at these opportunities where there's compatibility, where both human plus AI joining together really adds value and gets us towards that maybe 10-year vision that you talked about earlier.
I love it. I love how you really focused on meaningful work, because as someone with 3 children, I can tell you that's what I am most anticipating, is that the jobs of the future that are enabled by this technology bring more meaningful work to society, because we all want to have purpose. We all want to have meaning. Nobody wants to be doing, meaningless jobs or jobs that maybe, are incredibly repetitive. Everybody wants to be kind of really have that sense of purpose of what they're tied to. And I do think this is a huge productivity gain. But my advice is don't get too ahead of yourself, right? Don't start thinking about the really sexy race car type analogies. Like, there are simple proven use cases here. And by the way, those proven use cases are going to give your organization a real sense of comfort in going forward and trying the next thing and the next thing. And looking at human plus machine is going to be much healthier than human replaced by machine. So hopefully there's been an incredible value to our listener group. Rob, before I let you go here, anything else you want to share with the team, and maybe talk a little bit about where users can find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Pure Storage on LinkedIn, but more importantly, I'd love for you to check out on YouTube. Go to YouTube and look up the Pure Storage channel that is there. We've just started publishing the Pure Report podcast there starting in July. Now, it is a 6 or 7 year audio program, and we finally got this cool studio put together, and there's just a lot more interest in having somebody in person, the kind of dialogue and conversation that you can have. So we will keep the great episodes coming, but we are now prioritizing our video episodes there, and we're just getting through a really fun series backing our launch and bringing on a lot of our great technical experts. So would love if everybody went and checked out the Pure Report podcast. And Sean, it's really cool to see you kicking this off. I'm excited to see how and where this goes. And I think just talking about the news in a way that's intelligent and technical is going to be appealing to a lot of people.
Well, thank you for that. And thank to all of you for listening. For Rob Ludeman, I'm Sean Rosebaron here at Beyond the IT Headlines, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.